Hello BookTube and welcome to Weekly Reads. I've had a pretty good reading week, despite a rough start on Saturday. Since Monday it has been glorious. But before I get to that, I did watch some movies on Friday. TCM had an Ursula Andress focused evening. So I watched She and Clash of the Titans. This is the first time I've ever seen She complete. I've seen bits and pieces here and there. I've wanted to watch it for ages. I rather enjoyed the book, She by H. Rider Haggard, and I thought this adaptation is fairly good, except for I think the character of She herself. I think it really didn't work. This She is not nearly the powerful figure that Haggard's She should be. And in Clash of the Titans, I've seen this movie a trillion times, and I really enjoy it, so I still enjoy it. Anyway, so it's a pretty good movie experience, all told. So, let's get to the books. So, I started my reading this week with The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This is an epic fantasy inspired by African history and African mythology, with some bits of European mythology thrown in. Obviously, the dragon part. And it's about a young man named Tao who wishes to avoid military service, start a family, and have that dream destroyed when his loved ones are murdered, and he goes on a revenge-fueled quest to obviously gain revenge. I bailed on this book. I thought the writing was not terribly good. It was adequate, but it was really sort of, it didn't stand out. And I thought the characters just didn't really appeal to me. They didn't really quite work, the interactions. And the prologue really did not need to be here. It's like, I get it is the thing to have prologues in your science fiction and fantasy books. Just because George R. Martin does it does not necessarily mean he should do it, nor should anybody else. Because more often than not, the prologues add absolutely nothing to the rest of the story. And I had some quibbles with the world building, or at least the map, which really is... Anyway. I mean, the one thing I will give, that I think certainly this book does quite well is action scenes. While the writing is generally adequate, Evan Winter does shine when he writes action scenes. He is really, really good at that. But for me, it just didn't paper over all of the other issues I had with the book that eventually I bailed within 100 pages. From The Rage of Dragons, I moved on to The Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez to round out the Space Opera September. And I will say, I think this book is so far my favorite of the books I've selected for Space Opera September, although that's not necessarily all that high of praise. And again, I'm split on this book. There are parts I really liked, parts I didn't particularly care for. The book's novel opens. So it's about basically a freighter captain who is hired to take care of a young boy and see as he grows up for purposes she is not entirely sure of. And she's assigned a crew to basically help her in her quest, and they eventually form something like a family until the evil corporation that created the boy wants him back. Anyway, but the story begins on a developing planet that and their primary export is an agricultural product that every few years ships from the human space society come to gain to sort of pick up the crop. And this opening is one of my pet peeves when it comes to space opera, is this juxtaposition. Not necessarily having these kinds of, it's really sort of making them a planet of hats, of basically what you see being the whole of the planet. And I don't think necessarily spending as many pages as Jimenez does on this planet really does any. I don't know. Doesn't quite work for me. And I also wasn't terribly fond of the evil corporation sort of last minute intrusion. I really liked the interactions between Nia and Arrow, her adopted son, and how they develop as characters, how the crew of the ship develop. And I kind of wish it were a bit more just focused on them and them making a living, and the characters developing. Particularly, I think, with Arrow, whose maturation, his developing his exploration of his sexuality and his character, I thought really suffered because of the corporate intrusion and the kind of the fantasy elements. Too, he is engineered to basically be an adaptation version of a guild navigator from Dune. So in Dune, the FTL method is instantaneous. It's like you're in one point and then you're in another point. And to get between those 2 points, are really to prevent ending up in the heart of a star or in a situation that will destroy the ship. Guild navigators who have the ability to see the future basically guide the ships. But in the adaptations, although the 2020 might change that, but in the Lynch version and in the sci-fi version, it's highly implied that the guild navigators themselves are the FTL engines. Or at least that's what I think. I could be wrong. So that's basically what this boy is. He's a long-range teleporter. So I liked the book, but there were parts that I think I had some issues with. But I will hopefully have the time in the upcoming year or so to come back and have another go and hopefully settle my opinions. Ouch. And also try to avoid getting bitten by a book. Ow. That was unpleasant. So I had some time, and so I read 2 comics. The Nightfall Part 1, which pretty much collects the Nightfall storyline in DC's Batman comics. So for those of you who don't know, in the early 90s, DC Comics killed Superman in a storyline that took place over several years. He was killed by this new villain called Doomsday, and then eventually resurrected a year or 2 later after several successor or imposter Supermen made their appearance. So DC decided to follow that up with Breaking the Bad. So a new supervillain called Bane is introduced. He is super strong, using a specialized form of steroid, and he and his compatriots invade Gotham City. And in order to take out Batman, Bane decides to tire him out by attacking and engineering a jailbreak at Arkham Asylum, releasing the Joker, Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, and villains major and minor. So Batman runs this gauntlet, recapturing most of the Arkham escapees until he confronts the Joker and Scarecrow. And after rescuing the mayor of Gotham, who'd been kidnapped by the Joker and Scarecrow, he runs through a gauntlet of Bane's henchmen and eventually faces Bane himself. Bane has no trouble beating a seriously weakened and sick Batman. It's a curb stomp battle. Mind you, subsequently to this, I think Bane has never actually beaten Batman when he is at his fullest. I think I could be wrong. I mean, there have been some storylines lately that Bane might have actually won cleanly compared to like this initial one. But at the end of the fight, Bane breaks Batman's back. But he's not killed. He survives. He is crippled though, and in order to maintain order in Gotham, he appoints a relatively new character called Jean-Paul Valley, who is the superhero Azrael, to take over as Batman, with Tim Drake, the third Robin, being a sort of sidekick but also babysitter. Gradually, Jean-Paul Valley becomes a more and more aggressive, a more and more violent Batman, and he eventually goes after Bane despite Bruce's injunction to not to. So he at first creates a gauntlet of claws, and then eventually a full battle suit with which he can easily dispatch Bane, and that's pretty much Nightfall. And then there's a second part where it deals with, I guess, Azrael's tenure as Batman post beating Bane, and then him killing a villain, and then Batman eventually, or Bruce Wayne, getting better and training to reacquire his skills, and then challenging Azrael for the mantle of the Bat. I've had bits and pieces of this saga when I collected comics. I had basically from the Breakout to Bane breaking Batman's back. I think I had an issue of the Shadow of the Bat during the beginnings of Azrael's turn as Batman. And I also had the Night Quest, or Night's End, where Bruce basically, under the tutelage of Lady Shiva, who had also trained Tim Drake, requiring his skills as Batman by fighting the students of the Armless Master, and then fighting Azrael to take the mantle of Batman back. So on the whole, I enjoyed it. It was quite fun. It was a pleasant jaunt through memory lane. I really do enjoy the Nightfall saga, even though there are some bits that are a bit problematic. I found there's this continual running gag of a psychologist working at Arkham who had written a book and who is being interviewed intermittently. There are a lot of talk shows originating in Gotham, dealing with local Gotham politics. Way too many, to be honest. And they're talking to him, and I mean, he's meant to be really a straw man, a figure to revile, and he's constantly pushing his book, and it is just like, those scenes are honestly most of the time painful to read. And then I also read the second volume of the Seven Deadly Sins by Nakaba Suzuki, which I really enjoyed. It was quite fun. This sees Melodious, Diane, and Elizabeth gaining information on the whereabouts of several of the other members of the Seven Deadly Sins and going to Bast Prison to rescue a band and facing several of the Holy Knights who act as wardens of this prison. And it is quite I quite enjoyed it. So on Monday I started a new book, and has been a pleasure to read ever since, and that is Insurgent Empire by Priyamvada Gopal. So far I'm about 200 pages in, and it's about how anti-colonial insurgencies in India, Jamaica, Egypt, eventually Kenya, influenced an anti-colonial dissent and anti-imperial dissent in Britain itself. And so far, I'm loving this book. It is dense and literary. It's very much a sort of a literary criticism history where it's texts that are driving the history. And I'm loving this book. It is amazing. And I can't wait to get back to it, which I'll start again on Saturday. So I should finish on Sunday. I have about 240 odd pages left to go. So I should be able to finish it sometime Sunday. And if I do, I might read some comics or something. And if not, I might start a new book. But I'm definitely loving this book. It is amazing. And I'll talk more about it next week once I finish. So I might have some time to read some more manga, some more fairy tale or Seven Deadly Sins, or even some Lock and Key, and we'll see how that goes. I'll mention them next week if I do read any. But there are two novels I would like to read. The Lesser Bohemians by Eimear McBride. I've had this book in my collection for a few months. I'd originally bought this for one of my two reading projects, Around the World in 80 Books, but I'm not entirely sure how I should approach either of my two reading projects, so I might mention that on Monday and ask for your help to help me decide. But I've decided, since Steve mentioned this book in his favorite fiction tag, that I'm really ought to go ahead and read this. So I will read this coming week. And I also need to get to The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune, which I'm kind of looking forward to. So hopefully I will have another good reading week. So that's about all I have for this week, BookTube. I do want to start watching more movies. I mean, I have Netflix, I have other subscription services, and I really need to use them. So I might watch something or not, depending, and I'll report back on next week if I have anything. But I think right now I'm about to start rambling, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this off now. Thank you, BookTube. Have a great weekend, and I will see you on either Monday, or if not, definitely on Tuesday with a new tag video. And so until then, have a great weekend and stay safe. Thank you, BookTube.